It's Monday, January 8th. I'm your host, Sarah Beal. On today's show, we'll talk with Superintendent of Schools, Meg Brown. Then we'll talk with Planning and Development Director, Elizabeth Jenkins, about the renewal of the Growth Incentive Zone. Then finally, we'll get an update from Finance Director, Mark Milne. But first, let's get a look at today's top headlines. Town Council President Eric Steinhilber and School Committee Chair Chris Joyce have provided a timeline for filling the recent vacancy on the Barnstable School Committee. Interested applicants should submit their resume to the school department, main office, or the Barnstable Town Council office by Friday, January 12th. Once all applicants have been interviewed, the joint subcommittee will recommend 2 applicants to move forward. A joint meeting of the school committee and town council will take place at the town council meeting scheduled for Thursday, February 1st at 7 p.m. At that time, the final 2 applicants will have a second interview. Upon completion of the second interviews, a vote will be taken to determine the successful candidate for the Barnstable School Committee. For more information, please contact Cynthia Lovell, Town Council Administrator, at 508-862-4733. The Town Clerk's Office has mailed out this year's town census. The census voter street listing forms should have arrived on or about the first week of January. By responding to the census, you are providing proof of your residency to protect your voting rights. If all the information on your census is correct, simply sign the bottom of the census and send it back to us. Also, if someone has moved out of your household and is a voter, please give the Town Clerk's Office their address, email, or phone number so that they may contact them to obtain verification. If anyone has been added to your household, just put their information down on one of the blank lines and make all corrections on the form. If you cannot register to vote on the census form. If you have computer access, you can go directly to the Secretary of State's website and register online at www.sec.state.ma.us. Then you can click on Elections and Voting. You can also register to vote by coming into the Town Clerk's Office. You can spend a few minutes with them as they enter your voter registration into their computer. If you have any questions, please contact the Clerk's Office at 508-862-4044. Coming up, we'll chat with Superintendent of Schools, Meg Brown. Meg, thank you so much for joining us today. We had a little bit of a snow event last week.
Yes.
I want to kind of talk about that real quick before we get into some of the other stuff.
Sure.
Not much snow, but a lot of freezing.
A lot of freezing, a lot of wind.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Yes. Yep. So we decided to cancel school based on the forecast. I think it was, every time we looked at the map, it looked as though Hyannis was sitting right on the borderline between rain and snow. And, in consultation with town officials, our Director of Facilities, Dave Kaniak, Sandy Gifford, who heads up our transportation, we thought best let's just be on the safe side. I think we were in a lot of good company. I think every district east of 495 and on the Cape had canceled. So. Yeah. I know as we sat there throughout the day, I kind of thought, should we or shouldn't we have? But by what would have been dismissal time, it just was brutal outside. So in the end, it was a good decision.
Yeah, it's always tough when we're on that cusp. It's like it can either go rain or it can either go snow, but it's also so cold out.
Yes.
That even if it is just rain, it's that freezing rain, and it's not safe, and it was supposed to, the temperature was supposed to drop, and it was going to freeze, which it did.
Yeah.
So it's always better to be safe than sorry. Yeah. I know you did a 2-hour delay on Friday.
Right.
Gave DPW a little bit extra time to make sure the roads were okay, so the buses could get out and pick up the students, and any students and faculty that were driving were okay.
Right. That delayed start is such a terrific option. There are a variety of reasons. Sometimes we need to delay. Sometimes we have to clean up from a big snowfall, which wasn't the case. Other times it's to give DPW a little more time. Friday was a result of our bus drivers really needed some additional time because it was so cold to ready their buses.
Yeah.
We also didn't want our students standing out in the dark on Friday morning, given the temperature and other factors. There could have been icy spots around. So it was it was a good option to have on Friday to delay. We were able to get a good quality day in, and people were able to arrive safely to school.
Yeah, I'm sure the students were hoping for another snow day, but
oh, they were.
You want to save that for a real snow day because we might have another one, and they don't want to be in school too late in June.
Exactly. Right now, I think we're getting out June 16th.
That's pretty good.
So we always balance certainly the safety needs of our students are put first. That June calendar, though, it's easy to call a snow day, and then we're paying for it in June, the later we go. So I know it's the Cape, and our kids like to have their summertime, and so again, family, but we always want to put student safety first.
Yeah. What would you say are the best places for parents that are looking to get the most up-to-date information? I know you guys have a Facebook page and Twitter.
Yeah.
Is that going to be like the most instantaneous?
I would say that's the most instantaneous. We do have what we call our Blackboard Connect system, which is the ability to email and or do a phone call. So that's our primary source, is always to get information out. That supplemental means of communication are Twitter, Facebook, our district homepage. Those appear to be most instantaneous because you post it, it's there.
Right.
Where the Blackboard Connect system takes a couple of minutes to get the call out, to get the email out. So generally speaking, we'll always do that. Email through Blackboard Connect is our primary point of contact with our families. And then we'll do a phone call, but as it was on Thursday, for Friday for the delayed start, our elementary parents have asked that we not make the phone call at 5 a.m. and I understand that. However, we have some teachers at the high school who are leaving their house by 5 a.m. So again, it's a balance. So the phone call to all of our families will never go out before 6:15 in the morning. So the best advice to parents is to look at their email. You know, I have to make the decision by 5:15 in the morning if we're going to cancel or delay, and that's really to alert our bus drivers because they're starting to arrive at work at that time. So check your email by 5:30 in the morning. If you're super curious, phone call will come around 6:15. And if you're a social media user, that's probably the quickest way to get the information.
Wonderful. Yeah. The next thing I want to talk about is you guys are starting the budget process,
Yes.
which I know is a huge thing. And part of that is you're going to be visiting with the principals and seeing what their needs are. Let's talk a little bit about that process.
Yes. So we've started to meet with our principals to hear from them specifically what needs do they have at each of their buildings. One of our main goals and priorities is to keep our class sizes low. We do have a hard cap beginning for next year for our elementary classrooms, kindergarten through third grade, to keep those, an ideal cap is at 23. We have a hard cap of 25 because particularly for students in those early grades, we want to be sure there's a lower class size. So, we're certainly focusing on that. Again, we're a community that values what we call specials, so art and music and physical education. So we want to be sure that we're staffed appropriately to continue to offer those types of classes to all of our students, pre-K through, seniors in high school. So we continue to do that. So I would say, it's not as if we have a lot of money to spend. We really roll over from one year to the next what we're doing, look if there's ways we can achieve some efficiencies or reallocate funding. But generally, it's a strong focus on what's happening in the classroom, either materials or teacher-to-student ratio that we're most concerned about in terms of funding.
It's really important to know what the student body is going to look like, so you know what hiring you need to do ahead of time. Yep. So okay, great. So school committee is meeting this week. They're meeting on Wednesday at 7 in the town hall hearing room. So that's, I think, if there's always public comments. So if people have questions or they want to, give their opinion on anything, they can show up. But
absolutely.
Other than that, I think that's it. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be here. Thank you.
My guest today is Superintendent of Schools, Meg Mayo Brown. Coming up, we'll get a finance update with Finance Director Mark Milne. But first, let's learn about the GIZ renewal with Planning and Development Director Elizabeth Jenkins. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to talk about the GIZ and the renewal that you're going through right now with that. So let's start with exactly what the GIZ is, because I think it's from about 7-8 years ago the GIZ kind of came about. So
7, 8, 10, 12 years ago.
So let's kind of start with what exactly it is.
Yeah, so the GIZ is our affectionate acronym for the Downtown Hyannis Growth Incentive Zone. And this is essentially a planning tool that we have in partnership with the Cape Cod Commission, the regional planning agency here. And it's a way to help direct growth and new investment into areas that are regional activity centers. So it's a recognition of planning work that we've done in downtown Hyannis that promotes a compact, walkable community with a mix of land uses that is supported by existing infrastructure. So in many ways, in recognition for the efforts that Hyannis and the town of Barnstable have done to put a regulatory framework in place to support that, the Cape Cod Commission in exchange doesn't regulate projects in downtown Hyannis like they would elsewhere. So we talk about it as lifting their thresholds, essentially pre-permitting development in downtown Hyannis. So we went through that process with the commission originally in 2005, 2006 to establish the downtown Hyannis Growth Incentive Zone. It had a 10-year life span. We've extended that a little bit just to allow for the new planning and the new framework that we're putting in place. But we are going through the process of reauthorizing.
And that's going to be with the Cape Cod Commission to keep kind of like you said, the thresholds in place.
Correct. So it's been a partnership really over the last several months with the Cape Cod Commission working to do this. And this is the first time that there has been a growth incentive zone that's been renewed on Cape Cod. So it's been a great way, I think, for them to look at the tool and how it's working, for us as well to look at the impacts that the GIZ as a tool has had in downtown Hyannis, and then also take a closer look at what other sort of regulatory changes we might need to make to support that. And so if we turn the clock back to 2005, we can see that we did a lot of work to put the GIZ in place originally. We put new zoning in place, for example. We adopted design guidelines, so what we built we could ensure looked beautiful. We did capital infrastructure improvements, for example, all those great streetscape improvements downtown. And then as a result of doing all those things, we were essentially awarded, I guess, a growth incentive zone designation by the commission. So this time we're turning it a little bit on its head. We are looking at, again, where have we gone, where do we want to be, and then what additional tools do we need to put in place to achieve the goals of the growth incentive zone going forward.
What are some of the obvious changes that people might see in the renewal going forward?
So we're looking at a new framework, really. The last growth incentive zone was about measurement, but it measured the number of new housing units and the number of new square footage of commercial space. Again, that kind of pre-permitted development. But when we think about that, measuring number of new housing units, square footage, that's not really measuring, are we achieving the goals of building a community here in downtown Hyannis? And that's really what the growth incentive zone is about. So we're talking about changing the framework of how we evaluate and measure the growth incentive zone altogether. So we've been developing some tools with the commission, really a land use analysis, again, some data to let us know where we're at. We're calling it an infrastructure and amenities analysis. And these are kind of the building blocks of what makes a community. And then also a spatial fiscal analysis, which is going to be a little bit of a follow-up. But we're going to use these tools, again, to put new measures in place. So we're not simply measuring new development, we're measuring where we're going to build community. So it's a little bit different, and it's going to be a lot of data, but I think it's going to be great, and it's going to help us make informed policy decisions in the future.
That sounds great. Are you going to be taking any public comment on anything that you guys are planning on doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a very public process. We
Yeah.
probably engaged over 1,500 people through surveys and meetings to date. We've been doing some kind of targeted stakeholder meetings right now just to make sure we're on the same track. And then we're going to hold a big public hearing at the planning board in January just to present the new framework and the measures. And then it will go to town council for approval probably in February. It also has to get approved by the county as well.
Wonderful. So it's a lot of great stuff. It's a really big project. I'm so excited to hear that it's being renewed and it's the first one on the Cape. I love when we're kind of like the first people to kind of do stuff like this on the Cape. So,
yeah, but the commission has been great partners.
Yeah.
Again, I think it's really been a lot of work because it's changing the way how we're thinking about planning, really making data-driven planning decisions that are informed by a lot of public input. And I think from here it will lay the kind of put the framework in place that we need to tackle some of the other challenges that we have in downtown Hyannis, like modernizing our zoning and other sort of regulatory hurdles that we've identified. So it'll be a great place to start, and I think is going to put Hyannis in a really good place for the next 10 years.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming down and telling us all about it.
Great, of course, happy to be here.
Thanks. My guest today is Elizabeth Jenkins. She's the Director of the Planning and Development Department here in the town of Barnstable. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. One of the first things I wanted to talk about today was the 10-year financial forecast. I know with the charter changes, we're going to be going to a 5-year forecast next year. But what can you kind of tell me about the 10-year forecast and why we kind of do this kind of thing?
Sure. The 10-year forecast is, it's a good planning document for us in the past. It gives us an opportunity to look back over the past 10 years of financial transactions and try to identify trends that we see occurring, particularly in our revenue structure. It's probably the most important side of our general ledger is the revenue side of the ledger. Without, the revenues coming in as anticipated, we can't do what we want to do on the other side of the ledger, which is allocate the resources to certain services, provide services to the community. So we have to keep a close eye on what those revenue trends are indicating to us as to how things are going, and the 10-year forecast gives us the opportunity to do so, and then trying to project that out over the next 10 years is largely a guess, because there are so many outside factors that could impact all those various revenue sources that we can't necessarily control.
Right.
Decisions made at the federal level, whether it's tax reform or state level, with the amount of appropriations that we may receive from the state legislature and local aid, all of these outside forces tend to impact what happens here locally, and trying to project what that is nearly impossible.
Mm-hmm. So much can happen in 10 years.
Exactly. Sometimes things can significantly change in 6 months, never mind 10 years. Mm-hmm. But at least if we look back at the trends for the past 10 years, we can feel pretty comfortable that we can replicate those over the next 10 years, unless there's a specific issue that we know that's coming on the horizon. That's the benefit of doing long-range planning like that, is that you know certain things need to be done, and so we're always trying to prepare ourselves financially for what we can anticipate that's going to be needed in say 2, 3, 5, even 10 years, because we try not to focus on just the most current fiscal year and the next year's budget, but gives us an opportunity to do that longer range planning, because without that, communities could end up in a deep hole if they don't plan for things that we've identified that we know we're going to have to do.
Right. And if anybody's interested, this 10-year forecast is available on the town's website. I know it's right on the homepage, so if people
Yes.
want to give it a look and see, what may or may not happen.
Yeah, we know. Yeah, exactly. It is what may or may not happen. It's a good one. It's true, because again, there's so many outside factors impacting us that
right.
we can't control them.
And with some of the changes to the charter, starting next year, you're going to go to a 5-year forecast. Do you feel like that's going to make it a little bit more easier to forecast possibly what could happen if you're only looking at a 5-year clip at a time?
Well, it's essentially we're still going to look back over 10 years, but yeah, we're just going to cut. Instead of doing 10 years, we'll just eliminate those last 5 years and just spend a little more emphasis on focusing on trying to more fine-tune those first 5 years, mm-hmm. To try to get them to be a little bit more reflective of what we anticipate that's going to happen. So if we can narrow our focus from a 10-year period down to a 5-year period, I think we can get we can improve our planning over the next 5 years a little bit more.
Right, and 5 years is still a pretty good chunk of time. A lot can happen, a lot can change, and a lot can also stay the same. So
yeah, and it coincides neatly with our capital improvement program, which has always been a 5-year plan. So we'll be able to spend more time emphasizing the tie-in of the 5-year capital improvement plan with the 5-year forecast, and then how that translates into the next year's operating budget, because they're all interconnected.
Right.
And this will, I think, provide us an opportunity to better connect those documents.
Wonderful. Looking back on 2017, is there anything in particular that sticks out in your mind as, maybe a big project that the town was able to complete through maybe some of this, forecasted planning?
Well, I think the capital program that we've been, over the past 5 years, we've been able to allocate more resources to our capital program because in our long-range planning, we've identified the capital needs of the town and have focused on the fact that the capital needs continue to grow, and therefore we need more resources directed towards that area of our operating budget, and so we've emphasized adding more resources to that area of the budget every year as opposed to the operating side. And so I would say that that's really one of the things we accomplished was and continue to work on is enhancing the resources allocated to the capital program. We did that in 17 and the years before that as well, and we plan on doing more of that over the next 5-year period.
Wonderful. I know that planning has already begun. I mean, you're always working on the next budget, so I know we're getting ready to go into the budget process for FY 2019. Is there anything that our residents should be aware of coming up?
Well, we had a good meeting last week with our Capital Improvement Plan Task Force, whereby we had all the departments who submitted capital requests make presentations of those requests, their highest priorities anyway, to this team of evaluators, which is made up of department heads across the town, including the schools, the airport, public works, community services, and so forth. Gave us the opportunity for the task force to ask questions, to better understand what these projects involve, creating better organizational awareness of the needs that the town has across departments, so that every department manager isn't just hyper-focused on their own operation, but they have a better understanding of what the other departments are facing. Mm-hmm. So we had a good meeting last week. We ranked the projects according to which ones were more essential than others, so forth. And from there, we will do a secondary scoring that the task force will, that will take those projects and compare them to a set of criteria that are closely aligned with the town council's strategic plan, which then will give the town manager a data set, some information that he can use to evaluate the projects that have been submitted to him for consideration, mm-hmm. and he can use those to assist him in his decision-making process as to which ones to bring forward to the town council.
Yeah, the CIP process, I know, is a very large process because there's so many different projects that could be coming from any different department in the town. So it's great to see that, it's very thought out and very, very meticulous process.
It is. There's a lot of, this is a very large town. Being a seaside community complicates that even more in the fact that we have many waterways that need to be dredged,
yep.
harbors that need to be maintained, bulkheads. So it adds to the inventory of things that need to be cared for. Mm-hmm. Where your typical inland community, we all have schools, roads, sidewalks, but we have that added layer of being a coastal community that makes it that a little bit more complicated because of those additional features that you have to watch out for.
Right. Well, Mark, I really appreciate you joining us today. Is there anything else you want our viewers to know about before I let you go?
We are closely monitoring what's happening at the federal level with tax reform. Mm-hmm. The decisions that are being made there could have an impact on local communities, particularly in the capital side of things, as we were just talking about, because some of the decisions that they made may affect the cost of borrowing for municipalities going forward. Mm-hmm. And so we're keeping a close eye on that, which will, probably scale back what we'll be able to do under existing resources that we allocate to the program. So we may have to allocate even more to compensate for that. So just be aware that, what they're doing at the federal level right now will trickle down to the local level eventually if it's approved.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Wonderful. So. Well, we'll keep an eye on that, Mark. Thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to chatting with you again in 2018.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Bye.
Bye. My guest today is Mark Milne. He's the finance director here in the town of Barnstable. Now let's take a look at this week's board, committee, and commission schedule. Thanks for joining us today. We'll be back tomorrow with an all-new show. On tomorrow's show, we'll talk to Consumer Affairs Supervisor Elizabeth Hartsgrove, Senior Center Activities Coordinator Susan Griffin, and DPW Director Dan Santos. For Barnstable Today, I'm Sarah Beal.